Good morning or good afternoon, guys. Whether you're joining me from the present or the future, welcome back to another FutureFight Vanguard video. Um, so I've been going through like a lot of weird things lately. I know I mostly say this like a lot of videos, but there really has been going on a lot. Like I've been sick. There's a lot of new developments to my life, like kind of like we're moving soon, again, and stuff like that. So just trying to get everything in life together. I'm also starting a second channel. That there will be more information on that soon. I'm trying to get that together in the works as well, and I'll mention it when it is released. But basically, in order to catch up to where we're supposed to be, I'm gonna have to do 2 videos a day for 10 days by my calculations, or something like that. So I'm going to probably just start releasing as many videos as I can, just start pumping them out. Just to get these last few videos done of G-BT14 and the Bermuda set, and then we can get right into standard and premium. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you would like to see premium stuff still once we start doing standard stuff. But let's get right into it. Today we're going to be talking about the G-BT14 Shiranui deck. This is our Nubatama G-set deck. Very, very broken deck. A lot of people hate it. As you guys will see in my first game against my first opponent, he is pretty much whining about domination like the entire time. Or sorry, it was the second game. The second game I recorded. But yeah, this deck is pretty broken. I also hate it. It's just one of those things that you can't really get around because the way that it interacts with your deck, it just takes cards out of your hand. It's unfair. And there's not much that you can do to get around it, except if you play certain clans and you have certain cards in your deck that allow your Vanguard to not be attacked or something like that. Just an example of what I'm talking about is like the Gear Chronicle 10K can only attack if you have one or more cards bound. So that when it becomes the Shiranui players, when they dominate it, you can force them to dominate it by playing it off of Rene. And then when you play it off of Rene, the only way that they can dominate it and be able to attack you with it is if they have bound cards, which they can also get around it with Tamagane Metsu, but I've played a lot of players where they don't have Tamagane Metsu, or they haven't played a copy of him by the time they use Rene the first or second time, so you could just get lucky and be able to avoid an attack or two, and even avoiding just one attack is a huge, because each attack takes like 2 cards out of your hand, or G-Guard, or PG. So yeah, let's get right into it. We run 4 of the new Shiranui, 4 Blazing and Demonic Stealth Dragon Shiranuki. This is like a combination name, but Shiranui Zanki. What Zanki does is it has 2 abilities. The first is a Dominate ability that is auto, that activates on Vanguard Circle. It says during your turn, when this unit is placed on the Vanguard Circle, or when your G unit strides, meaning that something that's super dumb about this card is that it's not once per turn like other stride abilities that have the same like wording. So basically, when you the turn that you place it on Vanguard, and when you stride, so when you're riding and then striding in the same turn, you can do the domination skill twice, which is really, really stupid in my opinion. I feel like they should not have made it that way, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, when it's placed on a Vanguard Circle, or when your G unit strides, you choose up to any player's rear guards, and it gains 2,000 power. So basically, if your opponent doesn't have any rear guards, you can also just pump one of your units to change a number. And then if that unit is your opponent's rear guard, you stand it and dominate it, and then it can attack any of your opponent's other units. So basically, you can choose one of your opponent's units, it gets 2k, it restands, and then you can attack anything else on their field, a rear guard or Vanguard, which is pretty good. You can attack rear guards for control purposes, but I really just attack Vanguard because it puts the most pressure on my opponent. Unless the power is not big enough to attack my opponent's Vanguard, then I attack another rear guard that is important to them. Then the second ability is at the beginning of the ride phase. It has an auto Vanguard skill. So it says beginning of the ride phase, Soul Blast 1. If you do, you draw a card, and all players choose a card from their hand and call it to rear guard circle. And then your opponent cannot activate the auto abilities of the cards called with this effect until the end of turn. So basically what that means is that at the beginning of the turn, just like I said, that they'll take cards out of your hand. At the very beginning of the turn, they take cards out of your hand. They take 1 card out of your hand with this skill. And then basically like any like skill that you would be able to activate to get that card off the field, or change the game state, or change the board, like which are all autos like on place, it like destroys auto abilities. So you cannot use auto abilities when you call the card. So it's basically just truly making you lose a card from your hand. And it would have been a lot better for counterplay if they didn't do that, but they did. So you just lose a card from your hand, which can be huge when they're going into like Rene turns, because that's one less card to defend yourself. And a lot of times when I'm against a Shiranui deck, I'm like literally like 1 or 2 cards away from surviving their turn, usually in my hand. So it's like if they hadn't used that card to like, or if they hadn't took a card out of my hand unnecessarily, like I might have been able to survive. But then again, it does help you in some matchups like Shadows. I just play a grade 1 to the board, and then use the G Guardian to kind of like intercept with the grade 1s. You guys know which G Guardian I'm talking about, the G Flip Guardian, just did in the last video. But yeah, moving on, we have our other Shiranui, which is Shiranui Oboro. Our other Dominate Shiranui, I should say, because there is a very old Shiranui as well. So this Shiranui Oboro has 2 abilities. It has 2 auto Vanguard skills. The first one is at the beginning of your ride phase. You can choose a card from your opponent's drop zone. If you do, your opponent chooses a rearguard circle and calls it to that rearguard circle, and then at the end of the turn, they retire that unit. So basically, this is for your opponents where they clear their board or they try to get important units off the board so that you can't use their abilities. Well, you can just resurrect a card from the drop zone when you're on this one, and then you can like dominate it, use its abilities, yada 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 yada, and then at the end of the turn it retires so that you're not like officially giving them that card back for a bonus plus. Then the on-stride ability is when your G unit strides, choose up to one of your opponent's rear guards, dominate it at stand, and it gets plus 4,000 power to the end of the turn, and then it attacks another one of your opponent's units. So basically same thing as kind of Zonky, except some key differences is this one is when you stride only, and the other one is when you place on Vanguard Circle or stride. And then this one gives 4k instead of 2k, and then you can still attack any of your opponent's other units, so you can attack rearguards or Vanguard. Very good for control, like I said, but mostly you just want to attack Vanguard to get pressure on your opponent. Going into our grade 2s, we have 12 grade 2s. We have 4 Liquidation Stealth Rogue Sadasugu. What Sadasugu does is it has 2 abilities that activate on the rearguard circle auto. The first one is when this unit attacks a Vanguard. If you have a Vanguard with Shiranui in its card name, this unit gets plus 2,000 power, so it becomes an 11k attacker when you are on a Shiranui Vanguard, which you should always be if you are grade 3 and higher. And then the second ability is Generation Break 1, rearguard skill, counterblast 1 at the end of the battle that your other rearguard attacked a Vanguard. Then you can retire the unit that attacked, draw a card, and this unit loses this ability until the end of the turn. So at first read, this skill might seem really bad because it's like, oh, I have to retire one of my rearguards to draw a card. But really, it's just working off of domination, because a lot of people forget that during domination that the unit actually belongs to me, and at the end of the battle, it still belongs to me. So if I'm attacking like my opponent with something that's their own unit, then I can counterboss 1 and retire that unit at the end. So you're basically retiring one of your opponent's cards to draw a card, which is a huge plus. Like, it's a good bonus. Then we have 4 Stealth Beast Tamahagane Metsu. Helps you get around the Gears matchup for the Gears players that try to get around you with the ruling with, it's not Mary Block, it's whatever the 10k is in ZTB. Like, this helps you get around that. Basically, when you're playing against Gears, you want to use Tamagane Metsu and bind a card and then not grab it. Or you want to G-Guard, and once you bind your heals, then you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the game because you have heals bound. But Tamagane Metsu, when it's placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, you bind up to 1 card from the top of your deck, and then it's bound face down, so only the owner of the cards can look at them, so only I can know what's bound there. And then it's Rearguard, Auto Rearguard, once per turn Generation Break 1 ability is when a dominated unit attacks during your turn, you can counterblast 1. If you do, you choose a face down card from your bind zone, add it to your hand. If you do, this card gets plus 10,000 power. So not only do you get a free card to your hand just for a dominated unit attacking and you counterblasting 1, which is pretty easy to do. But this unit gets plus 10,000 power, and we run stand triggers in this deck, so it can be really threatening to your opponent when you're attacking for, like, 19, 22, etc. Like, all the numbers, like 19 plus any 7k booster is literally 26. So hitting a stand trigger would be 24. Not to mention, if, like, a lot of times when I use Tamagane Metsu, I have the stand trigger in the same turn. I don't know why. So I always use it on Tamagane Metsu, and then when I do, Tamagane Metsu is 22k, and it just ends up working out great because it hits good numbers. Then we have 4 Stealth Dragon Ungai. Ungai has 2 abilities. The first one is an auto ability that activates on the rearguard circle. It says when a dominated unit attacks during your turn, you can choose a card from your hand and discard it. If you do, draw a card, and this unit loses this ability until the end of the turn. So it basically allows you a drop 1, draw 1, basically filter out your hand a little bit when dominated units attack once per turn. It's basically once per turn, but in a weird way because it says that the unit loses this ability until the end of the turn. And then the second ability is its most useful ability that we really play it for is when this unit is placed on rearguard circle in your Generation Break 1, you get to choose up to 2 of your rearguards and 1 of your opponent's rearguards, and until the end of the turn, decrease or increase their power until it becomes 11,000. So if you, let's say that during the on stride you attacked your opponent and they took it and they hit damage triggers and they were relying on that to give them extra power to survive your domination stuff, you can literally just play Ungai, make 2 of your 9Ks 11K, so you're moving up the base power, and then you're also choosing their Vanguard, and their Vanguard goes back down to 11K, which is really good. It has won me a lot of games, like, so I just keep it in there at 4. It's a very useful card. Going into our grade 1 lineup, we have 4 stride fighters. Obviously, we want to stride whenever we can with just as least as possible. So in this deck, the least that you can stride with is 1 card, basically. So we want to stride with 1 card at all times, especially since we run 7 grade 3s. We want to run 4 stride fighters. Just stride as much as possible. Striding is how you win in this deck. And then also, this is our Shiranui Searcher as well, meaning that if we have Shiranui Oboro, we can play this card in the early game on the rearguard circle, reveal Shiranui Oboro, search Zonki, and then discard a card from our hand. So it helps us get to Zonki, which is obviously the grade 3 that you want to be on at all times. And then moving on to our PG, has 3 abilities. The first one is a continuous Sentinel ability, meaning that you can't run more than 4 Sentinels in your deck. You guys know that. Second ability is the PG skill that says when this card is placed on guard circle from the hand, you can discard a card, then choose one of your units that's being attacked, and it cannot be hit until the end of the battle. So this can PG Vanguard and Rearguard, so be aware of that. And then also, the third ability is a really good ability as well. When a dominated unit's attack hits a Vanguard during your turn, then you can choose a Utsuroi from your drop zone and put it to the bottom of your deck, and then you return another Utsuroi from your drop zone to your hand. So you have to have 2 Utsurois in the drop zone for the skill to activate. But something to notice is it's not Generation Break. It just says when a dominated unit's attack hits Vanguard. So if you are playing like the grade 2 game or the early game with your opponent or something like that, and you happen to, for some reason, have 2 PGs go to drop zone, and then you ride Zonki, and then you make Zonki attack their Vanguard and they take it, you can use this skill to get a PG back to your hand and a PG back to your deck. Also helps you not deck out in this deck, even though that's not much of a problem. Obviously, it's still, the problem is still there for most of any decks if they can grind you out for that long. But this deck, that's not really a real problem, because you kill your opponent really fast. Then for the rest of our grade 1s, we run 4 Stealth Dragon Ozai. Ozai says when your other dominated unit attacks a Vanguard, Soul Blast 1. If you do, until the end of the battle, this unit gets plus 3,000 power, and if you have a grade 4 Vanguard, this unit gets plus 3,000 power. So obviously we only really use this when we're on a stride already. So basically this card just says for Soul Blast 1, you're giving the dominated unit 3k, and then you're giving itself 3k. Then we have 2 Stealth Beast Mist Frog to round out our grade 1 lineup. Basically just a Generation Break 1 rearguard ability that says when another dominated unit attacks during your turn, you can draw a card, and if you do, that unit gets plus 6,000 power until the end of the battle. So very, very good, very solid. Then we have one Stealth Dragon Burai. Burai is our starter in this deck. It has our first ability, which is Forerunner. The second ability is when your Vanguard with the Dominate ability is placed on Vanguard Circle, you can put this card into Soul. And then if you do draw a card and choose a card from your opponent's drop zone, your opponent calls that card to Rearguard Circle, and at the end of the turn, retire that unit. So basically, Burai is very useful as a starter because it helps you get around the strategy of people not calling any rear guards in the early game, so that when you ride to grade 3, you won't be able to dominate their cards and attack them. Burai helps you get around that because you can actually ride Zonky, and Zonky and Burai skill will go off at the same time. So you can shove Burai into the soul, draw a card, make your opponent call one, and then you can dominate the card that was called with 2k from Zonky and then attack Vanguard. So really, really good. Then for our triggers, we run 8 crit, 4 stand, 4 heal. We run 4 Stealth Dragon Navaroi. This is our crit trigger for Shiranui, that when our Vanguard attacks, shoves into the soul, our Vanguard gets 5,000 and we draw a card. We run 4 Torosada. Torosada is basically just has an activation skill. During the main phase, when it's on your rearguard circle, you can shove it into your soul and countercharge one. Keeps your resources alive as far as soul blast and counter blast. And then we have 4 Stealth Dragon Oni Bidushi. This is our stand triggers effect. It has 2 abilities. The first ability is After Image. So After Image can be kind of useful for if you're playing against another Shiranui user and they make you call out cards with Arena and you want to call out cards that will hit for low power. You can call out Oni Bidushi and then not worry about using its skill if you can't during that time, because you can always After Image it back to your hand. And then another ability that we really play it for is its Generation Break 1 ability, which is when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle. If the number of cards in our hand is less than our opponent's, we draw a card, and then we put this card on the top of the deck, shuffle, choose one of our units, and it gets 3k. So not only does it draw a card and put itself back, making our deck thinner and allowing us the chance to not draw it back, not draw the same one back, meaning that we're thinning our deck and putting stand triggers in it, so we check stand triggers more often. It gives 3k to a unit as well, so it does change numbers with like Sadasugu. If it's being boosted by a 7k, it'll be 18 plus 3 is 21, change number. Then we have Tamagane Metsu plus 3, when it's 19 is 22, changes the number. Even Ungai, when it's just 9, goes up to 12, changes the number. So very, very good card. Then we have 4 Stealth Fiend, Kesera Pasara. Kesera Pasara. Kesera Pasara is basically just our new G-Guardian heal for Nubatama. Basically, when you G-Guard using it, if you have 2 heals in your drop zone, you can bind both heals, and then you can choose to countercharge one or soul charge one. Just another way to keep your resources alive. Going to our G-Zone, we do have, as usual, our 1 Ultimate Stride for those case scenarios where you need to use it. Ultimate Stride, as you guys know, is when you go into it, you have to discard the same card as your Vanguard, as what's on your Vanguard to go into it, and you must have at least 3 or more face-up cards in your G-Zone to use it. So you have 3 or more face-up cards in your G-Zone, and then you discard the same card that's on your Vanguard, and then you can Ultimate Stride. And then after you Ultimate Stride, if you fail to kill your opponent on the turn that you Ultimate Stride, at the end of the turn, your whole G-Zone, both used cards and cards that have not been used, get bound, and they're just gone forever for the rest of the game. And you can't be a Generation Break 1 or anything. So you really want to choose a picky time to go into your Ultimate Stride that you feel like will win you the game, because, or at least cripple your opponent enough for you to be able to fight them without any abilities for the rest of the game, because that's what you're going to be doing. But yeah, just be careful about timing for using your Ultimate Stride. This Ultimate Stride is for the Dragon Empire. It is 0th Dragon of Inferno Drachma. Its skill is when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, Counterblast 2. If you do, retire all your opponent's units, including Vanguard, bind them face up. Your opponent chooses 3 cards from their hand, discards 2, and rides 1 to Vanguard as stand. And it says in parentheses, the Vanguard is retired as well. So he or she rides a card from Soul if there are no more cards in the hand to ride. And then if you cannot ride a card from the Soul, or you can't write a card from your hand, you just lose the game. So it's not really likely that you won't have any soul and also not have any hand when someone burns you for drachma, because then drachma is just an auto win, which is crazy. But also, like, you shouldn't have 2 cards in your hand at the beginning of my turn. Like, that just seems really weird. But yeah, so then we have 4 Evil Eye Wisdom King Shiranui Rine. This is the man, the myth, the beast, the legend, whatever you want to call it. This is the card that people are most afraid of in this new Shiranui deck because it is absolutely broken, especially in combination with the other cards. So it has 2 abilities. Let's go through them. The first ability is an activation skill. During the main phase, you can counter boss 1 and flip a Shiranui Rine face up in your G zone. And then when you do, your opponent chooses 2 cards from their hand, forcefully calls them to separate rearguard circles, and they get plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. Then you dominate them, and each of them attack your opponent's Vanguard 1 at a time in your choice order, and your opponent cannot activate the auto abilities of the cards called with this effect. So this is just like Zonky, your opponent, like, screw auto abilities. Your opponent can't activate any of them. You literally just have to make your opponent play 2 cards, and then they get plus 5,000 power, which a lot of the times allows them to be able to hit your Vanguard. And then if you're Generation Break 3, meaning that if you go into this card and you've G-guarded once before going into it, or you just go into this card second stride and onwards, Generation Break 3, all dominated units get plus 10,000 and a critical. So basically, this is what stacks up and piles the damage so high, and what makes people so mad when they're playing against this deck, because when you dominate your opponent's unit, let's say that you're dominating a 9k, and your opponent's 11k Vanguard as usual. So you dominate your opponent's 9k, it gets 2k, becoming 11, and then if you're Generation Break 3, it gets 10,000 and a critical, so it becomes 21k and a crit, swing into your opponent. So that's going to take at least 2 cards out of their hand, unless it's a G-guard, which is essentially like taking a big guard option out of their hand originally anyways. So when you're Generation Break 3 and you make them call 2, then the cards get 15k because of the combination of power of both abilities, and then it gets a crit as well. So if they have to call something like a 9k or 11k, if they have to call 11k, like, God bless, like, that's 31 and a crit twice if they call 2 11ks. But the lower card they call, the more likely that they're wasting shield when they're calling them to the board. So it's just all around a hard deck to get around, and this is kind of what just wins you the game for free almost. It's very dumb. Then we have 1 Evil Eye Hades Emperor Shiranui Mukuro. An interaction that I guess I should mention that a lot of people don't know about when you're playing this deck. When you are playing against Night Rose and you're using Shiranui Rine, you can actually make the Night Rose player call using Rine, and then when the cards get called over and they die in Night Rose, the Night Rose player can actually activate a skill to use their Night Rose Resurrection skill to mill 3, and then call one of the cards that you just destroyed back to the field, and then they can call over the dominated unit that was just called, because you're dominating the unit, not the circle. So the circle still belongs to them. So they can call the unit back over the dominated unit, and then if that card is Negro Lazy that they called, they can either call another card over the card that the other dominated unit that you made them call, or if that card is Skeleton Cannoneer, they can just counterblast 1 and kill the other, like, dominated card just because that was your unit and they're killing a unit. So basically just really stupid things to mention with the interaction. That's why we run 1 Mukuro, because Mukuro is basically like, we want to make their Vanguard attack their board, which is most likely not going to be there anyways, but we just want to make their Vanguard attack, and it's better than using Rine in the situation where they have a board set up. And because Mukuro can wipe their board without them being able to do anything about it. So just very good. Mukuro's skill is Dominate, Generation Break 1 during your main phase once per turn. Generation Break 2, Soul Blast 2, and choose a face down card from your G zone, turn it face up, and then discard a card from your hand. You dominate your opponent's Vanguard as stand, and they attack each of your opponent's rear guards during that battle. So basically just a free board wipe. Very good. You also get the drive checks off of it, so you get twin drive. which is awesome. And then we have 2 Inma Stealth Dragon Magen Tenbu. Magen Tenbu is our first stride that we go into. Usually, because I don't like going to Shiranui Rine as opposed to most people for first stride, I'd rather be getting the full bonus out of 2 full Rine turns, because sometimes when my opponent uses Rine for their first stride, I'm like, okay, that's weak, like, whatever, I can survive that because they're not GB3. And then the second Rine turn is the only thing that I have to worry about surviving, and then I can worry about surviving, like, the other things that aren't as powerful. So, to me, I'd rather just do 2 full power Rine turns. So I use Magen Tenbu for the first stride. Also, Magen Tenbu can just do a lot, get a lot done, because you can dominate pretty much 3 times between riding Zonky, striding over Zonky, and then using Magen Tenbu. So just pretty good. And whatever you dominate will get +7 at the end of all that, because it'll be 2, 2, 3 from Magen Tenbu. So Magen Tenbu's ability is domination on the Vanguard circle once per turn. Counterboss 1 and choose a face down card with the same name as this unit and turn it face up. So you counterboss 1 and flip a Magen Tenbu, and then choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and it gets +3000 power for each face up card in your G zone until the end of the turn. And then you dominate that unit as stand, and then it attacks another of your opponent's units. And at the end of the battle, you retire the dominated unit. You can pay the cost to use its abilities as well, which would be the dominated unit's abilities. So you can use the dominated unit's abilities if you meet the requirements. That's another thing I forgot to mention with domination in general, but I'm pretty sure you guys knew that already. So we basically just use this as first stride when we can. Then we do run 2 Inma Stealth Rogue Mugen Lord. Mugen Lord used to be the boss of the deck before Rine hit the field and before Mukuro hit the board. But Mugen Lord can still be useful in situations where our opponent likes to fill their board very heavily and they're at 5 damage, because we can just do 5 attacks on them. This would be like a very good option to use maybe like after you've used Rine twice, because they're more likely to have a board, because you made them call cards from their hand to the field, and most likely they're not going to get rid of those cards for no reason unless they're Shadow Paladin or Tachikaze. So yeah, Mugen Lord is a great option to use after that. So basically Mugen Lord's ability is dominate. Vanguard circle once per turn, counterboss 1, choose a face down G unit with the same name as this unit, turn it face up. Then you choose up to the same number of rear guards as the number of face up cards in your G zone, and they get +4000 power. Then you dominate all of your opponent's chosen units that stand, and then each of those units attacks your opponent's Vanguard. So they can only attack Vanguard, but it is worth it if your opponent's at 5 damage. Pretty much the only time I go into Mugen Lord. Then we have our GB8, Roku Shikira-Kon. So what Roku Shikira-Kon does is our Generation Break 8. It's absolutely busted in this deck, especially. Its Generation Break 8 is when your opponent's unit is placed on the guard circle from hand. You can counterboss 1 or soul blast 1, and your opponent has to choose 2 cards from their hand and discard them. So basically, if you dominate your opponent, if your opponent's at 5 damage, which is the best time to use this GB8, and what they will probably be at if they've survived through 2 Rines, they're probably like barely surviving. But you basically can dominate when you stride this, give 2k to one of their units, make it attack Vanguard, and then when they guard with a card from their hand, if they don't intercept, then you can actually counterboss 1 or soul blast 1 to make them discard 2, and then all 3 of your attacks, like you want to set up 3 columns, and then you want to attack with your 3 columns, and all 3 of your attacks, you make them discard 2 for every time that they're guarding. So if you have a card that's going to take 2 cards out of their hand naturally, it's going to take 6 cards out of their hand, because they're going to have to discard 6 when you're using the ability. So very, very good. I don't think I've ever had an opponent survive the GB8. So once you make it there, you pretty much like win, because it's really hard to just survive Rine in general. But yeah, moving on to our G Guardians, we have 2 Zashiki Hime. This is our G Flip Guardian, which is Generation Break 1. If you're Generation Break 1 and this unit is placed on the guard circle, you can flip a G Guardian face up from your G zone. And then if you do, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and they may discard it. If they don't discard a card, then this unit gets plus 20k shield. So you really want to pick the right time to use this unit, because you really want to ensure that the 20k shield is going to go off. I use it in scenarios where my opponent is definitely not going to discard a card. Like, I just know if they would be discarding a card, they would be putting themselves in danger to survive my next turn. So it's either like you put them in a situation where if they discard the card, they lose your next turn, or you put them in a situation where you're going to get the shield anyways, because they're not going to discard. So then we have 2 Rikido Stealth Dragon, Gando Kurikan. What Gando Kurikan does is when this unit is placed on the guard circle, if the number of your cards in your opponent's hand is 3 or more, then this unit gets plus 5,000 shield. And then if it's 6 or more, this unit gets an additional plus 10,000 shield. So altogether, if your opponent has 6 cards in their hand, this card can get 15k shield and be a 41k shield, so pretty good. And then we run 1 Gahorakan. Gahorakan is our G-Guardian with Domination. It basically says when it's placed on the guard circle, you can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. If you do, choose one of your opponent's grade 1 rear guards in the back row, dominate it, and move it to your guard circle, and it's regarded as our guardian until the end of that battle. So you can basically steal one of your opponent's grade 1 units, block with it, and then your opponent loses it because after that battle, it goes to their drop zone, which is pretty good because there's a lot of good grade 1s running around that you can just steal from your opponent before they get to use the abilities. And it's just super dumb. But anyways, we're loading the replay now. So we're going to load our Shiranui Game 1. We're actually playing the Shiranui Mirror match right here. We ride, they attack us, we take it. We ride, we attack, we check nothing. They attack us with Vanguard, then attack with Vanguard. And they hit a crit trigger, so they put us at 4 early. We don't get the Shiranui that we want, so we play down a card. We play down the 7k, and then he rides and dominates my starter and attacks my rear guard, so I let it go. And then he attacks Vanguard, hits a crit again, so we take 2 more damage again. We ride, we make him call with Burai. We use the skill of Genki, Counterblast, Soul Blast, draw, and then we make him attack Vanguard. We play Tamagane Metsu, Binding, we play Ungai. Ungai makes his Vanguard 11 and both of our rear guards 11. So then we use Magen Timbu skill to dominate. We counterblast Soul Blast with Genki to draw a card. It gets 2,000. Then we use Tamagane Metsu. Then we use Frog to give 6k. And then we use Ozai to give 3k. So it would be 29 to his Vanguard. And he G-Guard steals our grade 1, which is unfortunate for us, but you know, it is what it is. We probably should have used our stand triggers before we use this, but I wasn't really thinking about it. But we are able to still use them anyways to pump up our Tamagane. And then we attack, we hit a crit trigger. He doesn't check any damage, and then we attack for 23. So yeah, we attack for 23. Our opponent makes us call a card with their Zonky ability. They call the stand trigger using the skill, and then they stride with 2 cards, which was actually pretty smart on their half, just because they would have had to stride with 2 cards, one being a PG, but they were able to draw into a card that they could use as fodder. So thankfully for us, I thought I was going to lose on this turn because he G-guarded twice. He's just Generation Break 3 right off the bat going into Rene. But we are able to survive just because he doesn't have a board to play. So he just plays down 2 crits, we PG, he checks, and then we stride, we use our Zonky skill to make him call a card from his hand. We go into Rene, and we basically knew we were going to win this turn because it's like pretty much impossible for our opponent to win unless he double 6 damage heals, which is not very likely. So we attack for 31 with 2 crit. Our opponent G-guards it into a 41, 31, and then guards with the additional 5. Then we come to call 2 cards, it gets plus 15k and a crit, and then attacks Vanguard, and he takes 2 damage, and he just loses. Just a kind of like a very, like the way that the deck works is it just eats cards from your opponent's hand like no tomorrow. So that's why people think that it's unfair, etc., etc. But going into Shiranui Game 2, we're actually playing against Messiah. This is our opponent that I was talking about, like, basically complained the whole time that I was playing him because I asked if I could play him to record some YouTube footage, and he said sure, but then he realized that it was Domination, and he was like, why are you making a Domination video to make this deck more popular? And it was just a really dumb conversation that I was having with him or her, but just because, like, it's like decks, look, like powerful decks will be popular no matter what you think about them, or no matter like if I make a video about them or not. So it's like me making a video about it doesn't make it like worldwide, like it's a secret thing that no one knows about, and I'm gonna make it popular. Like it's just one of the decks that got showcased in G-BT14. So it's like he was really mad at me for using Domination, and it's like I was like, I don't know what you want me to say, really. But anyways, we just survived his stride turn. We did G-Guard during his turn, so we can use Rine off of first stride. He takes our first Domination attack. We use Sadasugu to make him retire his card. We draw a card. Then we play Tamagane Metsu and call cards to the board. We use the Stand Trigger ability, Stand Trigger ability again, shuffle, pumping our Tamagane Metsu. We use Rine, make him call 2, and then we are Generation Break 3. So they get 15k and a crit. We use Tamagane Metsu and Ozai skill. So Tamagane Metsu goes up by 10k. The units that are attacking go up by 3k, and Ozai goes up by 6. So he says 1 second. I don't really know where he went at this point. He G-guards the 25. I asked him if he doesn't want to use skill. And then 22. And then he guards that. I attack for 25. And then we attack for 33 to his Vanguard. He guards for 26. And then 36, 41, so 2. We check a stand trigger because we put our stand triggers back. And we attack for 30, so he's forced to guard with cards. And then we attack him for like 23 or something. He's forced to guard like all the cards in his hand. And then he was just going to give up here, which is why he's complaining in the chat. He was like, I don't want to continue. Domination doesn't deserve it. So I just told him to continue, and he was like, nah. But then he randomly switched his stride and wanted to keep going. So I was like, okay. So he used Basaltis Messiah to lock our whole field. We G-guard, and this is that situation that I'd be talking about because I made him G-guard, and I wanted him to discard that card that he drew, but he obviously wasn't going to do that because, you know, he didn't want to discard cards and make himself like have less of a chance of surviving. So we go into Rine again. We make Frog attack into Vanguard. I actually probably should have dominated the Sacrifice Messiah. That would have been a better idea. So you couldn't lock me out of the whole thing. But he does use the skill. Yeah, he does use the skill of his Sacrifice Messiahs to lock. And then I have to put his Vanguard back down to 11. So I put his Vanguard back down to 11. And because he has all locked circles, I just attack the Vanguard because I can't use skill. He PGs, I check a crit, and I think I forgot to do a third check, which is actually kind of weird. Yeah, I only checked 2. Yeah, so anyways, so our opponent goes into Harmonics for 56. We guard for 41, 51, 61, 71. So our opponent checks 3, doesn't get through. Attacks for 12, and then attacks for 21. And then we literally just make him call 1. We go into the GB8. We make the GB8 attack into his Vanguard. He takes it. And then we attack for 26, and he just doesn't want to guard it because he's just so done with the matchup, so he just no guards. Even if he did guard, he would have had to PG or something, and then we would have made him discard 2 from his hand. So he would have discarded 4 just to guard my attack, which would have been pretty messed up for him. But yeah, then we're going into Shiranui Game 3 here, and we're playing against Pale Moon. This is one of those matchups where I'm talking about where your opponent doesn't really keep a board, so they just keep everything in their soul at all times. So in the early game, we crit him, we guard his attack, and then we take his rear guard. And then we rode Zonky. We couldn't dominate anything, which sucked, but he does get first stride, able to call out a full board for free, just like, you know, Pale Moon does all the time. I was actually really lucky that I took his second attack and I got a heal trigger, because I was actually able to no guard his Vanguard without much fear. And he did check a crit and a stand, so we checked another heal, which we got really lucky again, and then we checked a crit trigger. So honestly, like, our hand was just really bad, so I wasn't sure if we were going to survive that. but we were able to use Burai, make him call a card. Or sorry, we were able to use Zonki's ability to make him call a card. And then we use Frog to give +6, 18 is Vanguard, it retires. And then we attack for 14, we attack for 26, he PGs, we check a heal trigger, going down in damage once again. So this game was really just a lot of luck, just because this Pelmoon deck is really strong. He does top deck Stride Fodder, which was godlike for him. I thought he had already had that. But he is able to make a free board again off of nothing. And all of his units go up in power just because of Harry. So we decided to take his Cutie Paratrooper after looking into his soul, because he doesn't have another one. We know that he's just got to suck in cards and call out cards. So I would have rathered him done this than sucked up Cutie and called back out Cutie. So he checks crit, and then a grade 2. He attacks for 38. We guard for 41. And then we PG the other one. All of his cards go back. We make him call a card to board with Zonky, and then we just go into Rene. He says GG, just takes the damage, and he realizes that he's going to lose because I make him call 2 cards from his hand, and those cards are going to be attacking for phenomenal numbers with a crit. So he just wouldn't be able to guard it, and yeah. But that has been the video for our Shiranui Domination deck. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, or didn't enjoy the video because you hate Domination. Whatever. If you liked the video or you dislike Domination, be sure to leave a like on the video. It helps a lot more than you guys think. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you guys want to stay up to date with the videos that get posted from the channel. Also, make sure to click the bell button so that you can get a notification when videos go live. You can also check out the description down below for our social medias, which are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you want to support the channel a little more than liking and subscribing, there is our Patreon and our merch store for those options as well. But with that being said, this has been Josh from Cardfight Empire, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace, guys.